So, hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Making Lean Fly podcast. And this is a very interesting one. We've got two authors of a very interesting book called Quantum Lean, Taking Lean Systems to the Next Level. And that's the podcast episode subject because I spoke a few weeks ago to one of the authors, Sean Fields, and we had a really interesting discussion about the concepts in the book about quantum lean. And I thought, this is something I think the listeners really would like to hear about. So he invited his co-author, Michael Sanders, along. And we're going to have a chat about what is quantum lean. It's a very interesting subject. And the abstract that I've written for this episode is that many lean practitioners find it difficult to make lean stick. This lack of sustainability or stickiness is often difficult to diagnose. To understand why it's not working, the authors of Quantum Lean, Sean Fields and Michael Sanders, have a perspective on this, and in this episode will help us to think differently about how lean thinking works, what they call quantum lean. So welcome, Michael and Sean. It's great to have you on.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
thank you for having us.
Yeah, I'm absolutely excited for this. So let's start with a brief introduction to each of you. So Michael, could I start with you, please?
Sure. I'm Michael Sanders. I have been in manufacturing sector since I was a very little child when I was introduced to welding. And through that, I started my manufacturing career for the following 40 plus years. During that time, I've owned several businesses in manufacturing, distribution, and so on, as well as internet-based businesses. School-wise, I finished my undergraduate in biochemistry degree. Then I went to business. After many years, I sold off my interests. I went to my graduate school in engineering. I got industrial and systems engineering, master's and PhD. And then I pursued with MBA and finished my MBA. I've been practicing quantum lean since 2004. Prior to that, I've practiced current or ad hoc lean that was conventional for about 7 years. And I finally decided in 2001 I have to change the direction. And I was lucky that I worked with Sean, and Sean had the same view. So we started practicing it, and we came to a conclusion in 2004, and we rolled off the entire system.
Excellent.
Go ahead, Sean.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Sean, what about yourself?
Well, yeah, my name's Sean Fields. I've been in industry for 35 years, worked in a variety of sectors, small appliance manufacturing, custom machine shop fabrication, food processing, and my educational background's in industrial engineering. And I've worked in all kinds of phases of improvement and operational excellence, from lean systems to software development to quality management systems. And like Michael was talking about, when you're doing lean in a conventional way, you discover that people have a problem with translating what they read into the actual real world. And we kind of drilled down on that, and that's how quantum lean came about. And we'll talk about that more as the as the interview goes on. But that's really, as far as my story with quantum lean, that's, like I say, we can flesh that out a little more as we go. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you, Sean. And when I've read it recently after the discussion that we had, and what was really interesting, I picked out a few things that I'll throw in during the session. But I think to kick us off, I wanted to take something out of the preface. So why this book? And I thought it was really, really interesting that you asked some questions here, and you said, have you experienced the following? When someone says to think outside of the box, in the box thinking is about to follow. The moment someone tells you that things will be different, you can be sure that things will be the same. When someone tells you that things will be the same, you can bet that things will be different. When you hear businesses say that people are the most valuable resource, you will find that these precious assets are the first to be unloaded when time gets hard. And when your work area was changed, you were asked for input, but you'll find that your advice was completely ignored. And I thought these were really excellent, kind of provocative ways of opening the book up to the reader to who I think in a lot of cases will resonate with them, at least, the majority of those statements. So I guess I wanted to bring that out at the start because I thought it was a great intro to my first question, which is what is quantum lean? You've been talking about traditional lean. So maybe I'll throw that over to you first, Michael.
Okay. Well, quantum lean to us is a practical way of focusing on the product and fulfilling its needs throughout the entire facility. From the moment the order comes in until that order is completed as a product form and goes out. And that product can be goods or services, really doesn't matter. So to us, fulfillment process, how fast, how efficient, how effective, meaning high quality it should be, defines quantum lean. So we look into the time of the fulfillment, what it takes to complete the order and send out. That becomes product focused time measurement, which defines quantum lean's approach. Sean, you want to add to that?
Yeah, yeah. Because what we'll say is, if we're distinguishing quantum lean from traditional lean, the thing that we found is we worked with a whole lot of shops that don't do mass production, and one of the reasons that we found that people have trouble translating lean, from the book into the real world is that most accounts of lean are described from the viewpoint of mass production. It's like they assume you're making a whole bunch of something, maybe not identical, but a whole bunch of things that at least rhyme. And in a lot of situations, you've got people making things that may take days to make. And so it's hard to translate those lean ideas into a situation where, it's taking you days to make it and they're talking about doing attack time. It just doesn't generally translate. So the thing that we found is that if you do your frame of reference in driving improvement strictly from the viewpoint of the product, and you never lose that frame of reference, you actually get a very efficient and straightforward way of applying lean, because that's what quantum lean does. We take things from the viewpoint of the product, and it's like we've strapped a watch on the product, and what happens to it, like how, well, I'll put it this way. You did you ever watch the movie? It's 20 years old, but did you watch the movie Castaway, Philip?
Yeah, absolutely.
With
Yeah.
Tom
Okay.
Hanks, yeah.
Yeah, with Tom Hanks. Yeah, and for those people in the audience that haven't watched it, Tom Hanks works for FedEx, and at the beginning of the movie, there's a scene where he goes into a FedEx office in Russia, and he has a kid hand him a package, and he opens that package and he pulls it out, and when he pulls the package out, it's a clock, and the clock shows how long that package has been in transit. And in this case, in the movie, it was like 72 hours, which is a big no-no at FedEx. And so Tom Hanks really teased off on some people about, really ignoring the product. And that's really the idea of quantum lean. You view time from the view of the product and use that to drive your improvements. Because what will happen is the way people will recommend you do lean, they're often assuming that you've got an assembly line process, and the improvements you do are taking seconds off of a conversion or a value added process. When in reality, a lot of people are in a situation where their products are totally dead in the water. And so if you follow the product, then the quantum lean approach also helps you have a system for tracking the time in the product. And then it gives you a way to prioritize what you should work on based on the time that the product spends on the floor. I don't know if that described it, but that's what we're going after. So,
Well, that's fantastic, and I guess when I was looking at quantum lean, I thought, okay, so why the word quantum? And if I look at the Cambridge Dictionary, it says the smallest amount or unit of something, especially energy.
Mhm.
So could you maybe just expand upon why you use the term quantum?
well, one is it is catchy, so couldn't resist that. But the second thing is a quantum, as far as I've always understood a quantum, it's the essence of something. And to me, quantum lean is really trying to get to the essence of what we think lean is about. And what'll happen is you do quantum lean, it converges to the same answer as conventional lean. In our view, your answers come back a lot quicker. It ends up being a simpler way of determining what to do and when to do it. and you'll actually do the most impactful things in the proper order. Like you don't put the cart before the horse. And to me, in traditional lean, it's a real easy pitfall to put the cart before the horse. Like, for example, if you go into a shop and the production scheduling is atrocious, I can tell you if people do conventional lean, 9 times out of 10, they're going to start with 5S or workplace organization. And in reality, the thing they need to work on to get impact is the scheduling, because you'll drain about 80% of the waste in the process if you get the scheduling right. And if you have the scheduling wrong, all the 5S in the world is not going to help you that much. And so quantum lean has an approach to, like identify where most of the time the product spends is, where most of that time is, and then you attack the reasons for where most of that time is occurring.
I also like
Yeah.
to add
Oh,
to that, Philip. As far as quantum, you see, when we look at an organization has many entities in it that form that system. And when you look at all of these entities from MBA discipline and managerial systems that are very strong, obviously, they are the ones who make decisions and run the system accordingly. And in management system, there has been a lot of scholars talking about it over the past 50 years or so, especially with the transition to internet system and so on. But when you look at the heart of that, the entire focus is on the resources, meaning people, and TMI, meaning tools, materials, information. And these are the only focus points that they have. And they try to minimize the cost and maximize utilization. That's really what the focus is. We call that resource obsession. When you look at this pool of materials, resources, and whatnot, all these entities, to make sense for everyone in the organization, we look into the most common ground. What relates everything in an organization together? What gives a meaning for an organization to exist? Nothing other than product. The end result, what the organization is built for, to create. If it is goods, they built for producing products and then selling it. Without product, nothing really makes sense. So that becomes the most focal point. You may call it quantum as the minute element, but it is the simplest, easiest, and relatable element. Everyone relates to it. No matter what you do in an organization, you relate to it, you contribute to its being, you contribute to the time that it takes to be fulfilled and completed, and you also become at some point a hindrance in its path. The idea is to be practical. If you're making a product throughout its time, every single person can either help that product move forward or they become hindrance. They kind of stop it from moving forward. So we look into the simplest way for everyone in the organization to understand what the focus point is. And this is why we say product centric. And it makes a big difference in measurements, in metrics, all these KPIs that go through every organization. You look at it, hundreds of KPIs are created from mid-management above. GM many years ago came up with 5 elements to measure, which was people, process, product, time, and money. They did include product. But the fact is, it's blended with a lot of different metrics under those pillars. We're talking hundreds of them in different areas, and all of them focus on utilization of assets or people more, minimizing the cost. That's all they are looking at. And they don't focus particularly to the product's nature, because product is really what drives everything else anyway. And that was our focus, and that was our approach using quantum.
Yeah, I love what you're describing. I think what's interesting to me when I hear you both talk is what you're calling traditional lean is what Bob Emiliani, Professor Bob Emiliani, might describe as fake lean. Right?
okay.
This is
Yeah.
people essentially applying the lean toolkit erroneously, using it as a
Yeah.
set of tools that they apply dogmatically,
Yeah.
instead of as a system where you understand where flow is breaking down.
Yeah.
So in your example, Sean, I mean, for me, it would be crazy to go do 5S when you can see you've got a scheduling issue. What I would suggest is I would want to solve that scheduling issue using great 5S to underpin it and sustain it after you fixed it, right? So it's almost like, and when I read your book, and I've got to say to the listeners, it is great. It is great. I'm an author myself. I've written 3 books, but I truly enjoyed reading Michael and Sean's, and I think whatever level of expertise you feel you're in, it will really help you. So, and a kind of very simplistic terms, I would say you're describing how to do lean really well.
No, thank you.
So, and you've called it quantum lean, and I think it's a fantastic title. But it's how to do lean really well, how to think systematically. In your book, you kind of did a little demonstration. I'm just going back to my notes here again. So you talked about typical lean versus quantum lean, and you said typical lean: eliminate waste to minimize cost. Now, to me, that would never be my definition of lean.
Okay.
And then quantum lean, you've said eliminate a product's time in the system to eliminate waste and minimize cost. Now, to me, that's the essence of Taiichi Ono. All we're doing is reducing the time between the order being placed and receiving the money from the customer.
That's right. That's right.
Well, no, I agree with you in principle. One thing I'll say in practice that I'd want to add to that is that, to me, quantum lean is aiming at the same thing, that whether you want to call it traditional or, typical lean or whatever, they're aiming at the same thing. But I will say that I've not seen people take a certain system where you keep your frame of reference strictly on the product and let that drive what your decision making is. Because what I see is when people do, like, I'll give a little bit of background. There's a thing called a product path diagram that quantum lean uses to define the product's path through fulfillment. And that product path captures the different times that the product spends on the floor and categorizes it. And then there are certain guidelines, in an algorithm where you get an idea and an indication of what kind of issues you should be working on. And I've not seen that in any, like, whether it's a Taiichi Ono lean or a James Womack lean or whatever. Because the thing that I've seen is they talk about establishing flow, which I agree with that. And then they talk about, like implement pull, and they talk about, also eliminating waste. The thing that we've seen happens is that the bridge from those, like 5 basic ideas of lean into reality is the thing where people kind of break down. And the explanations we've seen, they are all mass production, and they present it in a very formulaic way. Like you got to establish tact, you've got to, and then you've got to do all those other things. And the one thing you run into is that a lot of, like, I'd say most of the shops we run into, you don't have tact because you don't make the same thing twice. And and also the demand rate is just fluctuating. And so you're just having to, respond to demand. And so that quantum lean really kind of ignores issues of tact and just, follows product time. And it ends up, when we've taught it to people, it makes complete sense to them, and they're able to take lean, that what was originally a kind of opaque lean ideas, and now they're able to apply them to whatever situation they run into.
Yeah. Again, no arguments from me, Sean, because again, that product path analysis is great. I think it's fantastic, and what you described, that job shop type of challenge, or and we have both the challenges you've talked about in GK Aerospace. We have long cycle parts that take several days to produce at relatively low quantities, and we have job shops which are making different parts. I'm not saying there aren't any repeaters, but it's almost individual parts that then recur on a infrequent basis. And and I've often talked about Kevin Duggan's tact capability as opposed to actually designing to tact. And I saw some similarities, but I do like the elegance of your approach. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Michael, I think you're speaking, but you've got on mute.
Yeah. I'd like to add one more item to that. And this is great that we have to really recognize and be grateful for Womack and Jones introducing lean manufacturing term and system in their classic book of The Machine That Changed the World. We are grateful for that. There is no doubt about it. They started the traction. The idea of Taiichi Ono and his learnings from Henry Ford and going and launching Toyota system, I always talk about that. Even when I was a professor, I refer to that all the time in my courses and in my practical projects. I refer to that. But this is nothing to take away from what it is that they did and what it is that Womack and Jones introduced. We look at it from two angles. One is if the idea is continuous improvement applies to everything, including lean. Lean must be improved. You can't just say this was launched in 1956 in a full-blown version by Toyota system by Taiichi Uno, and it's going to be the same way until the end of the time. No, it's going to improve. And we don't want just to improve the tools or the different elements of that. We want to look at the whole entire lean manufacturing system as it is introduced, improve that. And that's one of the bases for us to look at it and say, okay, continuous improvement must also apply to this. That's when we said, okay, let's look at it and see what happens. When we took and practiced that conventional or their version, which is the original version, it just simply did not work in many companies. A machine shop we are talking about can be 20-man operation or can be 3,000-man operation. We have massive fabrication shops that house more than 1,000 people. They don't produce anything more than 2 or 3 alike. So scheduling and orders and demands become so fluctuating, and it's very difficult to get in there. The other thing is I question is today, I don't know how it's in Europe. In Europe, probably similarly, maybe even longer, as my experience shows. If you order a car today, a Toyota, you go to the dealership, I want this car. They're going to say 6 to 8 weeks. And then 8 week passes, and then they come and say, hey, by the way, it's on its way, another 2 weeks. So I question that because it takes 63 seconds for a car to come out of the line in Toyota facility, which they hold the record. And it takes less than 24 hours to be in the entire system. Are you telling me that they are fulfilled with millions of cars, that they have a backlog of millions? It takes me to get 8 weeks, 10 weeks to get a car. So there is something wrong in that. And we say the idea is you have to look into it and see what applies, what's applicable, what's relatable to the organization. Often that system is very difficult to relate to the needs day to day, week to week of the organizations to apply and make sense to them and sustain. They just simply cannot sustain. So we believe when we look at it, it was a fantastic thing when they introduced one side of the coin, which we believe was all resource focused. The other side of the coin was not turned over, was not even touched, which we call product focused. They did not focus on the product and its path, the time and system of that, what it takes for the product to go through and what it experiences during that time. We brought it down to 3 symbols, just 3 symbols. When you look at product path diagram, you have 3 symbols. When you look at value stream mapping, you start with 26. Recently, I checked, it's gone all the way to 80 plus. It's not the game of symbols. You take those 26 symbols to a shop floor guy, to a supervisor. Say, hey, we're going to do this value stream mapping. He's totally lost. And as a practitioner, we've done this. We go there, we excite them, we give them a lot of fantastic examples to make sure it sits, it lands, and it's understood. They get it at that time. Next day you go, they hardly remember one of the symbols. They don't understand. It just doesn't relate. When we focus on one entity, which is one product, that's it. And we say, let's look at these 3 symbols. Everyone understands it. Everyone in the organization, doesn't matter the rank. They all relate to it. They understand it. And they can actually work with it. They carry that on their own. That's the biggest advantage we bring to the table. We make lean sustained by the organization themselves. Reality is, many of these large organizations we've worked with and we know of, conglomerates even, they first looked into it immediately. Let's hire a, an expert and call him director or vice president of our continuous improvement department. Immediately isolated improvement to a person or to a department. Now, the expectation is those people are going to carry out these improvements, and then we are going to take the benefit of that. When you ask these leaders, well, you've had this department, you've had these leaders and these directors of continuous improvement in your organization. What has been the benefit? 99 out of 100 can't even point out what the benefit was. Was there really any gain? Because it's not sustained. It becomes departmentalized to one group or one individual, depending on the size of the company. So washes away, totally takes away the actual people who do the job, the workers, the operators, the employees who carry the work. It takes them out of the equation. Therefore, it's never going to sustain. So it becomes a very difficult task to get them engaged and extremely expensive. In our approach, it's quick, it's meaningful, it sustains, it's very minimal cost. You get a fraction of the cost of transition through quantum lean versus any other lean approach. And you actually put a foundation that lasts by yourself. You become self-directed lean system. And you don't have to hire experts, one or two experts, just to become entitled that type of a person. And we avoid that. The savings on that alone gives you the opportunity to translate all the actual changes and improvement to your operators. Operators carry that on as a daily task, which makes their job easier. And we completely loud about it. Our lean approach, which is quantum lean, focuses on product because one of its side and the most important conclusions or results is simplifying, making the job easier for the people. If it is easier, it is safer, it's low cost, it's faster. You can look at it in life. Anything you've ever done, if it is easier, it's going to be much faster and much less time consuming than anything complicated. We know that. So that's the challenge that we bring to the table.
Thank you, Michael. I think that's you've given me so many more questions to ask, and I think we'll ask Sean to maybe answer one of those in a moment. But there's a part in the podcast episodes that we run where we ask each of the guests to give us a fun fact about themselves, and the idea is let's lighten the mood a bit and get to know a bit more about you. So, Sean, what can you tell us? What's a fun fact that maybe even Michael might not know about you?
Well, I was actually one time I got to be in a police lineup, so what I just happened is almost like it was a TV show or a movie. I happened to match the description of someone who committed a crime. This was when I was a teenager, but I was wearing a blue flannel shirt. And believe it or not, at the time I had shoulder length brown hair. And so what was funny is that the assailant was described as that, and this cop saw me and he took me down to be identified. But fortunately, it was broad daylight, and so the lady didn't identify me as the person, so I was okay. But I'm a pretty mild mannered person, but I actually have been one of the fortunate people that got to stand in the police lineup. So
Gosh, yeah, that is something, isn't it? I don't think many people fortunately get that experience. So that's a really nice one, Sean.
Well, what's funny is at the time I had no fear because I knew I didn't do anything wrong. But now I would be terrified knowing how the justice system can sometimes, derail.
Oh, yeah.
So I was dumb and lucky, so that was the good thing. So
yeah, the naivety of youth. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So Michael, how can you top that one?
Well, I don't know if I can top that one, but I've had many fun facts. Many of my fun facts have come out of some of the very difficult situations in my life. You can tell from my accent, I wasn't born here. And I came here and I turned 22 10 days after I arrived to the United States. I've had many fun facts. Prior to those fun facts, I had a lot of difficulties, and when I overcome those difficulties, it become fun fact. But I'm going to share one with you, which is really interesting, and it relates to every audience will love it. When I was a professor in Michigan, in one of the universities, I don't want to name it, but I had back then the idea of teaching live online was a very very new idea. It wasn't. We didn't have any of these technologies we have now. I'm talking 2002, 2003. So our university had this studio. We had this live course going. And my course was dedicated to management of companies. Companies managers attended my course. I had about 63 managers from 8 different centers around the world. And that was live course. And I don't know if you ever did this or not, but back then, when you go to computer, you click on some URL. You wanted to share that with I wanted to do it with my students. And every now and then certain bug would come, and then the screen would start popping, many numerous screens would pop up. It would be very difficult to get rid of them because we really weren't very savvy or proactive about the bugs on the internet. So I'm in the middle of the lecture. I am talking. I'm really in the groove, and I tell my audience that I have 3 URLs in here. Let's go ahead and look at them. I'll show you exactly what I mean. I click on one of them. It's beautiful. I click on the second one. Of course, the director and the camera, everything is there, and it's being live broadcast. And it brings out these hundreds of screens, bam, 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 popping up, all of them pornography. I was totally lost, completely lost. I didn't know. I started panicking. Shut it down, shut it down, shut it down. So
Oh my
we
gosh.
did that, and I was very embarrassed to tell you the truth. So everything comes back in about 5 minutes. We are back. We are live, and of course, I'm getting a lot of these notes, a lot of these fun statements. You better be prepared before you come to the class. Those kind of things. It was fun. Next day, I'm walking in the hall. The provost is coming just against me. We're walking past each other. He says, "Dr. Sanders, I hear you had a fun incident yesterday, didn't you?" I was just red as apple. I was just so embarrassed. But he was a great guy. He had the fun out of that. And nothing really happened, but it was just the moment of pure embarrassment for me.
Oh, you're just lucky, Michael. It was before the days of cancel culture.
Yes, yes, yes. I know, I know. I would have been fired on the spot. Yeah, I know, I know.
Oh wow, wow. So two very interesting uh, stories there of fun facts, and both very closely related in terms of potential criminality as well.
That's right.
So brilliant, brilliant. Right, so let's jump back into the subject, and Sean, I wanted to. I think we've talked about a few of the things around the key elements of quantum lean and why it's different, but I guess bring it together, Sean. Why will we get different results? In what way is it really different to, as I say, doing lean really well?
Okay. Well, yeah, what I'll say is different is that you apply quantum lean, you'll get your results faster. You'll require fewer iterations to get to the best answer. I'll give an example. And I'm not sure how it goes in Europe, but in the United States, there's like what they call Lean 101, where the basics of Lean are taught. And in that Lean 101, they often do a simulation where you build airplanes out of Legos, and it's done in 4 rounds. And the way they improve that process, they start with a really conventional manufacturing setting, and then in 3 rounds, they make improvements in the processes. When by 4th round, you've got it pretty ironed out. Now, the thing that we found is that when Michael and I are doing quantum lean with the Lego simulation, we actually have to throttle quantum lean back, because what'll happen is if you actually apply quantum lean properly, to that Lego simulation, you'll have it done in like basically one round. You'll have almost all the improvement in one round, and you won't get it all. But it's kind of like the way it goes in when they do a traditional lean approach. It kind of almost occurs, the improvement's linear. But like in quantum lean, the improvement, if you apply it properly, will be exponential. And so we have to slow it down so we don't rob the rest of the course of all its juice, if that makes sense. Because it's kind of like it becomes anticlimactic if you make almost all your improvements in one round. It kind of blew my mind. I actually went, oh, okay, yeah. I was going, wow, I graphed it, and I went, oh man, you practically get all the gains in one fell swoop. And so it's a little bit of a kind of a buzzkill, so you kind of have to spread it out a little bit.
You're going to have to rename it Miracle Lean.
Well, yeah, yeah. It's just, I mean, ultimately, yeah, you'll get, yeah. I'll say this, and I'll give an analogy, but the thing that we found, and yeah, okay, so you're there. You froze up for a second. So is that in math, they're like you've heard of operations research where you're trying to optimize a particular objective function given a whole bunch of constraints. And to me, there's a principle there that's used a lot of times, and it's called the primal dual. It's called the primal dual theory. And the idea is if you've got one formulation of an optimization problem, it's called the primal. It's if it's really complicated to solve, there's often a formulation called a dual of that, and it's almost like you flip the equations, and the dual is often simpler than the primal, and they both converge to the same answer, but they do it from a different direction. And we think of quantum lean as the dual to the traditional lean primal. The traditional lean is formulated, but it often ends up being kind of complicated. And if you just take the dual in the quantum lean formulation, you'll converge to the same answer, but it'll be an easier convergence. That's the way we characterize that.
Yeah,
Does that make
very
sense? Or
Sean,
yeah,
Sean, also let's make sure that
yeah,
we also emphasize on one fact as well, because the results
yeah,
we achieve are well understood by everyone, all
right,
employees
yeah,
of any rank, and they can
yeah,
actually take it and use it themselves. And that's a
yeah,
big difference we have.
yeah,
The
yeah,
other lean is very difficult for people in
yeah.
different
Well,
levels of the company to even understand and go with and run with it. They
yeah,
just can't. And
yeah,
so ours is very simple. They take it. They completely love it because it's so easy
mhm,
for them. It's like a new
mhm,
game they learn, and they can actually apply, make their jobs
yeah,
easier. And that's
yeah,
a big difference that we really are proud of. And it's
yeah.
important to keep that in perspective.
Mhm,
Because again, reading the book, I initially thought, okay, this is going to be another technical solution to solving problems, but it actually became very clear very quickly that the human elements are very much in that.
mhm. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely.
humans are involved. You got to factor it in for sure.
Yeah. So I think what again, what I really liked as well in the book is the examples you put in there, especially I mentioned this in the preamble that we had before we started recording around the appendices, and you had that inventory
Mhm,
primer
mhm,
example as well.
mhm,
And again, I think what I'd like to just pull out in case it's not fully come across yet is what are those key elements of quantum lean that really make the difference? So you've talked about the simplicity of it. So let's imagine, okay, I invite you into one of our sites and I say,
mhm,
look, we've got these customer service levels, we've got more inventory than we want to have, the usual
mhm.
stuff you probably encountering.
Yeah.
What would you do initially? What's the first thing that you do under
Okay.
that scenario?
Okay. Well, let's become the product and let's walk its path, and then we kind of follow what the product does, and we've got those three symbols to characterize the time the product spends in fulfillment, and we capture those on a piece of paper and a computer or whatever, but we capture those different time elements that the product spends in fulfillment. And then we have a certain way of going about determining priority from that. But it's like, for example, we've got what we call a delay, a non-conversion, and conversion. Those are our three symbols. And so in this case, when we follow your product, if the plurality of the time sits in delay, we're going to start drilling down on the delays that the product's encountering. And then we're going to look into for the different delays, like, and we're going to pursue them in order of magnitude. But let's see, the biggest delay, what are the major reasons we determine that those delays are occurring? And what are different lean tools and other solutions we can do to attack the reasons that those delays are occurring? And what we found is that when you pursue it in that order, a lot of times when you start attacking, like let's say it is one of those typical situations where delays are the plurality, is that when you start getting rid of delays, you often start draining the system of non-conversions automatically. And so maybe, in a case where someone would be going after non-value added tasks in a traditional lean formulation, but not attacking the delays that cause them. If you attack the delays that cause them, you get rid of the delay and you get rid of the non-conversion. That's one reason that quantum lean tends to be efficient. But I don't know if that's making sense. But that's what we would do at that plant, and we would just keep pursuing it in that order. If you were a plant where most of the time was spent in conversion, we would start working on the conversions. And by conversion, it's what most people think of as value added. But we'd be working with you. Okay, let's start working on the conversion steps and optimize those. But
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, Sean. And
yeah,
again, anybody who reads your book, I think it's written in a way that it really, really comes together. So this has been fascinating for me. But unfortunately, as with all good things, they do need to come to an end. So what I'd love to do to finish off is really just ask you both to give your advice to anyone who wants to start with quantum lean. And of course, the first step's going to be buy your book and read it, of course. But once they understand some of the concepts, how do you start with quantum lean? Michael, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, let me start that. And I think it is really important you brought the people element. It's really important to refer to that as well. Generally, most of the time, we have seen this, and roughly about 30% of our current clients are those who have started lean journey and they just can't go anywhere. And they come to us and they say, hey, what's going on? And can you help us? And we go back and we say, the first thing we say, okay, whatever you learn, let's just put aside and we're going to cleanse you out of that and let's go to simpler way. And there is a reason for that. Majority of the time, better than 90% of the time, lean practitioners and even companies who desire to launch lean, they look into their technical problems, which ends up either losing money or not having enough revenue or having too much inventory or issues with the production process or service process. That's they look at it. They want to make it improve. So they go into lean. And when they ask experts to join and help them, the first thing they do, they walk through as this Gemba walk is, they come back and say, okay, I can do this, I can do that, these tools, that tools, I can do this. Let's have a training with your management. And then we go ahead and launch 5S or whatever. They don't keep an account that the most crucial thing for any improvement, particularly with quantum lean we do, to sustain and to have a chance of great success is when the leadership totally commits to it. If they don't commit to that, everything you do is not going to go anywhere. And that's been one of the pitfalls, because all of these tools from value stream mapping and wastes and all of these categories is music to the ears of the management. And they see that, okay, you can go ahead and apply that tool. I'll be in great shape. I don't have to worry about it. I'll support you when you need it. That's the old saying that we learned from our friends. One of our friends really articulated there's the difference between commitment and of course, support. At breakfast, as it goes, the chicken is supporting, whereas the pig is committed. So that's what we're looking at. And if you don't have that commitment of the leadership, then it's not going to go forward. That's one critical issue I bring to all's attention, to the viewers and listeners' attention. You must make sure they understand what you're going to do, what the end goal is. And if the end goal is not going to have any effect in the time of the product to be fulfilled and carried out, In other words, it's not going to have any reduction on that. Any improvement you do, I'm sorry, is absolute waste of money and time. It's not going to have anything staying for a long term in any company. You must make sure any improvement you do in any organization of any size, any type, any part of the world is going to reduce the time of the product in that system of the organization. From the moment the order enters until it goes out as the finished product or service, you ensure that that time is reduced. If that's reduced, you're on the right track to improve. Now, what do I use? What tools, what methods do I use to improve? We invite you to take a shot at Quantum Lean. It's faster, it's much less time and less cost for you, and it teaches you to keep it and use it yourself as one of your back pocket tools. You don't have to always ask for experts to come on and help you. So it actually allows you to sustain your desire and initiative for improvement internally.
That's excellent. Thanks, Michael. And yeah, we need more lean pigs, obviously.
Yeah,
that's right. Great. That's right.
Thank you. Sean, what would your advice be?
Well, like we've said, always, like center on the product. But the second thing, I mean, this is any effort and improvement's a good thing. I mean, even if you have to go back to the hardware store many times, it's ultimately a good thing that you do it. And so I'll say, don't let a perfect answer later get in the way of a good answer today. Because a lot of people will, just want to delay to get that answer just exactly right. But sometimes just take a good answer now and keep building on that. So.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I think that's great advice, Sean.
Yeah.
So it's been an absolute pleasure, Michael and Sean. It was a great opportunity when Sean and I connected and we had a chat. I thoroughly enjoyed reading the book. I'm not on commission, listeners. I'm just recommending it because it really is a fantastic book. I think it'll really help the thinking to change a little and think about how things can be done differently, better, simpler. And yeah, I think this has been a great conversation for me, Michael and Sean, and I hope the listeners have enjoyed it. So all that goes for me to say, as usual, is to the listeners, thank you for your attention. And remember, it's about changing how you lead, not who you are.